We all think we know New York City, the skyscrapers, the history, the attitude. But what if I told you that its entire origin story, the very thing that makes it so unique, has been a secret, hidden for centuries? Well, today, we're going to uncover the real story of how New York actually became New York.
So, have you ever really stopped and wondered, why does New York feel so different from other great American cities? It doesn't have that revolutionary, kind of buttoned-up vibe of Boston or Philadelphia. It's just, well, it's New York. It's chaotic, it's all about business, and it is endlessly, amazingly diverse. So, where did that DNA come from?
Well, here's the thing. The answer isn't where most people look. For centuries, the story we've been told about New York is an English story. But the real truth, the key to its soul, lies buried in a past that was almost completely erased from the history books.
Okay, so let's dig into this. The very first piece of evidence for this hidden history is actually hiding in plain sight, on the city's own official flag.
Check this out. For most of its modern history, New York City claimed it was founded in 1664. That's the year the English showed up. But then, look what happened in 1975. The city itself officially changed its own seal, pushing its birthday back almost 40 years to 1625. Now, this wasn't just a minor correction. It was a huge public admission that its own origin story was wrong. The real story didn't start with the English. It started with the Dutch.
So why? Why was this incredibly important Dutch history just gone? Well, this quote really says it all, doesn't it? When the English took over, they didn't just rename the city, they rewrote its history in their own language and effectively buried the Dutch foundation that had already made the city what it was.
Okay, so let's keep building this case, because now we're going to tackle one of the most famous legends in all of American history. The idea that Manhattan was bought for a handful of beads and trinkets.
$24, come on, we've all heard it a million times. It's the ultimate real estate steal, right? The story goes that the clever Dutch swindled the native inhabitants, buying the entire island of Manhattan for what would be about the price of a pizza today. But that's not what happened. Not at all.
The truth is, that whole $24 story, it was basically invented by a historian in the 1800s. It has nothing to do with the actual deal that went down in the 17th century. The real story is way more complicated, and honestly, so much more interesting.
The actual price that was recorded was 60 Dutch guilders. But this wasn't cash being handed over, it was the value of the trade goods they exchanged. We're talking useful things like iron kettles, axes, and tools. But even that isn't the most important part of this story.
And this is the real heart of it. The two groups had completely different ideas about what owning land even meant. To the Dutch, you buy a piece of land, you put a fence around it, and it's yours forever. But for the local Lenape people, that was crazy. You couldn't own land any more than you could own the sky or the ocean. So for them, this deal was most likely an agreement to share the island, to use its resources together. It wasn't a sale. It was a massive cultural misunderstanding.
So, if the Dutch weren't just here to pull a fast one and grab land, what did they bring with them? What was it that so deeply shaped the character of this new little settlement?
I love this way of thinking about it. It's the perfect metaphor for understanding New Amsterdam. You see, unlike the Spanish conquistadors who came to the Americas with empty suitcases looking to fill them with gold, the Dutch arrived with their suitcases already packed. Not with gold, but with powerful, world-changing ideas.
So, what exactly was in this metaphorical suitcase? Well, it was three revolutionary concepts for the time: a relentless spirit of commerce, a very practical doctrine of tolerance, and a built-in instinct for diversity. Let's unpack these one by one.
First up, commerce. New Amsterdam wasn't founded by a king or for religious freedom. Nope, it was a corporate venture, a startup launched by the Dutch West India Company. Its goal was simple: make money. The governors weren't nobles. They were essentially branch managers. This meant that from day one, the entire colony was about the deal, the trade, the hustle. Sound familiar?
Second, tolerance. Now, this wasn't born from some high-minded philosophy, it was just good business. If you want to be a global trading hub, you got to trade with everybody. Their own constitution literally said no one could be persecuted for their religion. And this is a perfect example. In 1654, they welcomed the very first Jewish refugees to North America. Not because they were saints, but because those refugees were good for business.
And finally, diversity. Unlike the Puritans up in New England who wanted to build this closed, uniform society, the Dutch wanted talent, and they didn't care where it came from. Get this, The very first families to settle weren't even Dutch. They were French-speaking Walloon refugees. And within just a few decades, this tiny little outpost at the edge of the world was home to people speaking 18, that's 1/8, different languages. It was a melting pot from the very beginning, by design.
Okay, so we've unpacked the ideas from that Dutch suitcase. Now let's see how those ideas, commerce, defense, pragmatism, were literally built into the physical map of the city we know today. So everything started right at the bottom tip of the island, with Fort Amsterdam. To protect their trading post, they built a wall to the north in 1653. For trade, they took a major native trail and widened it into the settlement's main commercial artery. The city's layout wasn't planned out on some grand grid. It grew organically, based on the needs of business and security.
And this is where it gets so cool. Those original Dutch structures and paths, they're still right there under our feet. The Wal, which just means the wall, became Wall Street. The main path, Herenstraat, became Broadway. The English just came in and slapped new labels on a city that was already there. The blueprint is pure Dutch.
Now, it wasn't always a walk in the park. The colony had a series of these really tough governors, like the famous Peter Stuyvesant. He was an authoritarian guy, tried to rule with an iron fist. But that spirit of commerce and individual hustle from the suitcases created this feisty, democratic community that constantly pushed back against him. And you know what? More often than not, the people won.
Which brings us to 1664. 4 English warships sail into the harbor to take the colony. But by then, honestly, it was already too late. The city's character was set in stone. The English takeover was actually surprisingly peaceful. And sure, they changed the name from New Amsterdam to New York, but they couldn't change its soul. Think of it this way. They might have changed the hardware, but the city's operating system, its core programming for commerce, tolerance, and diversity was already installed, and that software was Dutch. So when you boil it all down, the essential pillars that define New York today are a direct inheritance from that original Dutch settlement. Its relentless commercial drive, its incredible diversity, and its hard-won tolerance. All of it started with the ideas packed in those suitcases nearly 400 years ago.
So if the next time you walk down Broadway, or you just feel that incredible, chaotic energy of millions of people from every corner of the world all striving together on one small island, maybe you'll think of it differently. You're not just standing in New York, you're standing in the ghost of New Amsterdam, and that is its greatest secret.